It's easy to say waste not, want not. Here's how to do it. This is Sustain What with Ed Humes and Sarah Nichols. You'll learn about them in a moment. I'm here with Sarah, who's a masterful, a pioneer and leader in crafting ways for waste costs, the cost of waste reduction to be borne by those who, the manufacturers and packagers who provide all these things for us. It's a great system she's worked on here in Maine. She's now at Clink. You'll learn more about Clink. And Ed Humes, who's a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter, journalist, and author of many books, and with a wide-ranging previous list of books he's done on all kinds of topics. The one topic I think you've done two books on is garbage, which I was talking with Ed recently at a 92nd Street Y online event. And so I want to ask you, what makes garbage or waste so special that you would devote the hard work it takes to write a book more than once on this topic?
Oddly enough, the writing about trashy subjects is actually quite fun. And I had a blast working on this book and meeting incredible innovators like Sarah. And the first book, Garbology, Our Dirty Love Affair with Trash, I have to admit, it's one of my favorite all-time subtitles. It really focused on what we throw away, what we roll to the curb each week, and how much more of that there is than we realized. When I wrote Garbology, it was 7.2 pounds of stuff that we, each of us, man, woman, and child in America, threw away. This time around, I wanted to expand the definition of waste and look at all the other forms of it that's embedded in our daily lives, in our products, and how we get around, and how we make and produce our food. Everything really adds up to the most wasteful civilization in history. I think that's a pretty good subject for a book, especially if you can focus on solutions.
That's great. And I'm just going to have Sarah introduce herself briefly. So are you a Mainer by birth?
I am. I was born in Bath, Maine. I did move away for a little while and ended up back in Maine because people here tend to grow roots, and when they go away, they tend to come back. So that's what I did too.
And why waste for you? What was your sort of journey to who you are so far?
Oh, that's a very good question. I've been asked that question quite a bit, and to me, it just I've always feel like that I've been an environmentalist. That's just kind of part of inherently who I am. So I didn't necessarily have an aha, like I care about the environment and want to fix it moment. It's just kind of how I was raised, and leave the world a better place than you found it. I took that pretty seriously, I guess. But I will say that at UNH, that's where I did my undergrad. I tried 3 different majors. Physics wasn't really for me. Marine biology wasn't really for me. And then I took an environmental resource economics class, and I had light bulbs and fireworks and all these things go off. And, just the idea of, economics for me is really the study of how people make decisions and the systems that are at play that create these big shifts. And I just, and I can apply those basic economic principles to waste and my work, but also like I find that it's applicable to like my personal life too. The value of perfect information and clear roles and responsibilities, and all of that. So
right,
yeah.
And then policy. You talk about economics, but the word of politics and policy is a whole nother morass. And Ed has a whole section in his book on your work in Maine. So what tempted you to get into that arena? I guess it makes sense. If you want to make difference, you have to sort of buckle up and dive in, or
so after grad school, I ended up going to UC Santa Barbara, where Ed is now living in Santa Barbara.
Oh, that's interesting.
But I went there for grad school, and I specialized in environmental policy there. So I continued on my economics journey pretty much. And I think I think policy is just necessary. We're, a bunch of humans living. We have to kind of create rules about how humans are living on this planet if we're going to sustain ourselves. And I think that for me, I was just lucky enough to get a job out of grad school that worked on local policy. And then, I graduated up into state level policy, and it's all the same types of skills. All you're trying to do is to get the decision makers to make the right decisions for the public good. And I just think that it's so fascinating to work we have these huge catastrophic problems that are threatening the existence of humans all over the world, and it's going to take humans to fix it. It's just it's a pickle.
Yeah, and again in the book, Ed ranges through a number of examples of this, showing the systemic nature of these problems. That it's one thing as a homeowner to do the things you can do. My wife Lisa, who's a retired environmental educator and teacher trainer, has been great about like switching us over to the little slivers of laundry soap instead of the big jugs, and many other examples like that. But it's a systemic problem too. And we'll talk about the bottle bill and about recycling payments in general. Ed, just back to you in terms of your book. What is the balance, Ed, for you between the sort of the individual's role and what can be done systemically or on these issues?
It's really a continuum. Actually, Sarah's story is so compelling because she kind of bridges that gap between individual choices and actions. Sarah worked for years on spreading the word about this idea that the people who create unrecyclable or poorly recycled plastic waste and packaging should be responsible for it rather than taxpayers and consumers. And she got traction on that by converting people to her view that, one at a time, going to town meetings, talking to people, recruiting people to say, hey, not only can you make different choices about how you buy packaged goods, you can also participate in the policy making process. Here's how you can contact your legislators. Here's how you can access your local governments and make your views known and help champion this policy. There was a small army of people by the time Sarah was done saying, we need to make this change because it makes sense. Why should we be cleaning up the mess that others are making? And that was a compelling argument, and it turned individual actions into a statewide policy that now is spreading around the country. It's a total shift in how we recycle.
Yeah, and here's a page from the book where you're citing her plan was to make money for Maine citizens and cities and towns. I live in Lemoyne, one of Maine's towns, and just a month ago, the budget meeting, the budget for recycling came up, and the EPR came up in a way that's coming down the line. So Sarah, could you just talk about that journey? What's so interesting to me is what you just laid out there, Ed, is what a top Biden administration official, Jigar Shah, told me on a broadcast about the Inflation Reduction Act and the infrastructure law. Huge buckets of money, but it's not the old story anymore. It's a story of abundance. And what has to happen is for, as he said, there's 19,500 towns in America, and only 5,000 of them are bigger than, 10,000 people. And he said, so you need someone in every one of those towns to be the sort of change maker. So Sarah, it sounds like you've been that person. So just describe that in the context of what others might learn from your experience on how to build change from all these town meetings upward.
All right. Okay. All right. There's a lot there. So for towns like Lemoyne and others in Maine and all over the place, waste and recycling is typically the third most expensive thing for them, behind, say, schools and police and fire and all of that. So it's an absolutely gargantuan amount of money, and it's in many cases that money's just getting thrown directly into the garbage. And I liked, one of the analogies for me is, I don't know if the analogy is the right word, but let's say that electricity bills and water bills were also paid for by the town and taxpayers, and you pay taxes and everybody can use as much electricity and water as they want. Your neighbor's got a heated pool and lights on all the time. You'd be like, that's not fair that I have to pay for all of that. And for some reason, that's okay with trash. I don't, I think a lot of reason that, that was by design. I do think that, the producers of all of this waste, that's kind of, it's part of the plan. So that's the theory behind it, is you're putting, that's part of the reason I like pay-as-you-throw programs, where people pay for their trash bags in their town, because that sends that personal signal to them to put the stuff in the right bin, and reduce their trash. I only think that that's fair if there's a bin to put it in. So charging people for trash bags if there's no recycling or composting provided, and no work behind the scenes to make sure that there's less waste in the first place, I don't find that as fair. So we're extending that pay-as-you-throw, pay for what kind of polluter pays principle on a grander scale to the producers of packaging. And I guess I want to say that this is not a novel idea. Most countries all over the world already do it like this. For many decades, all over Europe and beyond, that's how recycling is paid for. So that's how we know it works here. And that's how we know it can be done, when everybody talks about how confusing is this going to be when Amazon and Walmart and Procter & Gamble and Kellogg's all have to pay for this. That's what they're doing. All of, Canada, EU, Russia, China, Brazil.
So we're the anomaly.
Yeah. So passing policies in the politics in the U.S. is different, with a lot more corporate influence here. And I think, a lot of corporations are coming around to this idea and coming to the table. It's, devil's in the details here, but we've, just since I've been working on these issues for, I guess, 14 years now, there's been a huge sea change there. Like, instead of trying to stop and kill all this progress, they're coming to the table in a more meaningful way, which is really great.
Yeah. Ed, we're going to get back to some of the other themes in your book in a minute. And but I wanted to ask you to weigh in on this too, the corporate power part, and how whether you're looking at some of the other things you look at in the book, like carbon dioxide, which is waste. It's a gas. We don't see it. It's the bubbles in beer, which makes it kind of hard to make the point about it being an unhealthful waste. But what have you learned in writing the book that sort of resonates with or clashes with what Sarah was saying?
Oh, well, this producer responsibility or polluters pay principle is so powerful. And I mean, logically, we shouldn't stop with packaging and containers. As pernicious a problem as plastic pollution is, both for the environment and for the cost of dealing with this mess, it really, well, as you noted, it should apply to the fossil fuel industry as well. We are paying for the damage caused by that product. Its entire business model is so profitable because we just excuse it from responsibility. That's the same with disposable. It's a very good analogy, actually, disposables. We're in an aberration moment when it comes to producer responsibility. This isn't normal. In the past, and up until the 1970s, beverage companies were responsible for their packaging. They took those glass bottles back, they washed them and reused them 20, 30, 40, 50 times. We act like reuse is some new concept. It was always reused. Back to the colonial days, we reused bottles. You had to bring them back. Right. They were literally taking deposits in the colonies from buyers to merchants, so they would bring back their valuable and reusable glass containers. So right now, the way we're this supposed convenience of having unrecyclable plastic waste being stuck with it, that's not normal. We just think it is because we've been doing it for a while, and we forget that it used to be different. It's a principle of capitalism. If we're keeping our profits, we bear our costs, right? That's the idea. And that's really what the law in Maine and elsewhere, holding producers responsible for the cost they're imposing, is getting back to the fundamentals of capitalism. It's not so much regulation as removing a subsidy.
Right. There you go. A subsidy that's harmful directly in terms of saddling small towns and all of us with these costs.
We're paying to kill ourselves, basically. Wow. How stupid could it be?
So, Sarah, this is a slide from some earlier presentation I think you gave. We're going to talk about Clink specifically in a minute, but there's a journey here, and that has culminated in this new extended EPR law that's coming down the pike. So what is there something weird about Maine, or was it
Um,
just that you lived here?
No, no. Well, the fact
That
that
was
the
it.
Natural Resources Council of Maine exists and has
Uh-huh.
for over 60 years is part of the reason. So that's where I was working for 10 years when I worked on this law. So in the 70s, Maine was I guess I'm feeling second, maybe third state to pass a bottle bill. There was all right around the same time with Oregon and Vermont. And that's the deposit return system, which is a type of an EPR approach where the producers are responsible in some way for managing the waste on the other end. And actually, Angus King, one of our sitting senators now, was NRCM's lead lobbyist for that, which I think is a fun fact. And Maine really became we're one of the states with the most types of these EPR laws. So for people who are listening and can't see this slide, we have a law for batteries, mercury auto switches, electronic waste, mercury thermostats, cell phones, mercury lamps, paint. And if this was a newer slide, you'd also see unused pharmaceuticals and the packaging law that we passed here. And we actually are unique in Maine too. In 2010, before I started working at RCM, we passed a product stewardship framework law, which actually made it a policy of the state to move more product categories into this type of system if they met certain criteria. And one of them is voluntary efforts to recycle aren't enough. It's taxing on taxpayers and municipalities, all these things. So pretty much every single thing hits the mark. Yeah, and I think that Maine, too, part of the reason why, one of many reasons why we're special here is we, as a cultural part of who we are, we don't like waste here. We like to use it up, wear it out, make it do or do without, that whole thing. My grandfather used to have a tin of nails too bent to use, like it literally said that on the tin. So I think, and then we're also smaller, there's not so many cooks in the kitchens here, and we have a citizen legislature that is not as influenced by corporate interests. So I think that has really made us a fertile ground for this type of policy.
And Ed, you in your travels, you found other anomalous towns in terms of other kinds of waste, energy waste in particular, that violated the idea that we're all in these red and blue buckets and that we fundamentally behave differently if we're in one or the other. Can you talk about Georgia? There was a town, or was it Georgia or Florida, where the golf carts and all that stuff?
Peachtree City, Georgia. Yeah,
Peachtree
that's so
City.
transportation's the most wasteful thing we do, really, and our cars are just horrendous wasters. 4 out of $5 you pay at the pump it goes to the waste that your car is generating, and that fraction that's left over, that's what actually turns the wheel. So we're a little backwards on the physics of our transportation, and that's fixable in a variety of ways. Peachtree City, Georgia, for years has been kind of just parking their cars. They haven't gotten rid of them. It's a town about 40,000. 30 miles or so from Atlanta, and they have a secondary road system that just kind of evolved over the years, over 100 miles of it now, that connect everything in and around town, all the way to the regional airport, the industrial park, the restaurants, the downtown, everything. And
so wild.
No cars are allowed. It's golf carts, and it's or golf, not much. It's not all connected to golfing. I suppose it started that way. And e-bikes, regular bikes, hikers, walkers are allowed on these pathways and all, but not cars. And there's crossings, and they're signed for a golf cart crossing, which cars have to yield to them. And it's kind of paradise for these folks. You think, I got there, I was very skeptical. Golf carts are really terrible substitute for a car, and then you leave and say, wow, a car is a really poor substitute for a golf cart. It's fun.
Right.
There's no traffic, there's no crashes, there's scenery, there's socializing. You just stop and chat with a person in the other lane on your commute to work. Who does that in the real world? Well, this part of the real world you do. It's so inexpensive. So it's the best second car you're ever going to want to have. This little electric vehicle that does 90% of what you need to do in a vehicle, because that's how we drive. Half of our trips are 3 miles or less. 93% of them were under 25 miles. You can do all that. You don't need a 5,000 pound, $50,000 Tesla to, go get a bag of burgers through the drive-through, which is more like how we drive every day than
Right.
the long road trips we seem to be obsessed with when we think about electric cars. This is an alternative.
Right.
And it saves a ton of money. It wasn't motivated by concern about the environment or climate. It was motivated by having an accessible, inexpensive way to get around most of the time. It works.
Yeah, I got a comment in here from Joanne McGarry. She's in Humboldt County, California, a longtime viewer of Sustain Wet, saying, donating my car. Gas is $5.99 a gallon here. Taking the bus, triking to food co-op, walking to Cal Poly. It can be done. I guess
It can, for sure.
That's great. And Alyssa Zazara has been posting too. Love that. Use it up. Wear it out. Oh, she likes your bent nails. I must say, I haven't been like that. It does not have a label on it. That's pretty cool. So Sarah, you've been doing some road showing here now. You go to, I think, have you testified for various states where this process is poised to possibly spread?
For the EPR for packaging law?
Yeah.
Well, I've since, so after we passed the law.
Before you got to where you are now. Yeah.
Yeah. So, after we passed the law in Maine, at NRCM, we created a EPR for packaging advocacy toolkit, and put it online and have top 10 tips and tricks. I feel like we learned so much going through this process that we wanted to help, make sure that other states didn't have to reinvent the wheel. And each state is really unique, but anybody who's interested in pursuing this in their state, go there. It's got a ton of useful information. And I've done a lot of presentations for people in other states, submitted a few testimonies here and there, but I think my value is more in, at that point, was helping the Marges, which we can talk about, that Edward wrote in his book, but helping the people in those towns, in those states, really gain the tools that they need to do the work, and provide resources to them that way.
Dig in a little more in that story you were just about to.
Oh, with the Marges.
Yeah.
So I love this. So in my job before I worked at NRCM, I worked at a little organization called RCAP Solutions. I had a grant under USDA Rural Development to help towns in New Hampshire increase their recycling. And I worked with this wonderful woman, Marge Bonneville, in the town of Tilton, to pass a pay-as-you-throw program and make recycling easier there. We had kind of this movie-like ending to get that through the town council. It was wonderful. And she was just such a force. I realized that you can't, I couldn't march into a town of Tilton with my own agenda. I want to be there to help the people that are doing the things. And you have to have a Marge in that town or nothing will get done. So after that, I went to go work at NRCM and focused a lot on local policies, a lot on plastic bag bans and foam bans, which did lead to the state level policies, but I wouldn't work in a town that didn't have a Marge. And I just really learned so much from that. So, my friend Victoria Simon is the Marge in York, Maine, who worked to pass the state's first plastic bag ban. And I actually just went to her 75th birthday party on Friday night. And I realized I've known her for 10 years and people were asking how I knew her. And she's like, well, I found Sarah's name in the paper and called her up. And that's what it takes to be a Marge. You're just, you want to do it and you need some help. And I'm there to help that kind of person.
So Ed, across the landscape of the waste not landscape, how many kinds of Marges, or have you found situations that don't involve a Marge? It feels like this is, as I said earlier with Jigar Shah, in terms of harvesting federal resources for LED bulbs and everything, they need a Marge. He didn't use the name Marge, but yes. I get it. So how do we make more of them?
The Marges are iconic, and I just love that story because it's so human. I love everything about it, and I met Victoria as well. And she's a dynamo, and she shows up. I think that's the secret to being a Marge. You show up, and every community does have a Marge. They may not know what they know they want to do something. They're not sure how, and kind of Sarah's the Marge whisperer. She kind of gives them some tips on how they can get involved, and those pieces are so essential, and seeing the results, because this law in Maine was really a grassroots driven process, and businesses were won over. The leading craft brewer in the state, Allagash Brewing, got on board and said, you know what, we should be responsible for this mess we're making. You guys are right, and I'm in. And it helped beat back this sort of automatic pushback. Oh, this is regulation. It's going to kill jobs. It's going to raise prices. And so you had other businesses saying, no, we can do this. And then the fact that Canada and other countries were doing, they're kind of materialized experts from those countries who came in and said, no, we've never seen price rises. There's no job losses from this. All the myths were shut down. And that combined with that grassroots public support for something really big and game-changing all came together. I think Sarah mentioned that even the across political parties, the leaders in the legislature in Maine got on board and supported this bill. I think it's kind of an example of why framing our environmental problems like plastic pollution, but also climate and other things around the subject of waste. It's just a big tent. Everybody, I think I said this when we were on the 92nd Street Y show, that it's, there's no political faction saying, yay, waste. It's just, it doesn't work that way. And what Sarah did is really flip the switch, as you said in the title of the show, on what happens to our waste and who should be responsible for it. And ultimately, I think it's going to drive us toward a more reusable economy instead of a disposable economy. And that is going to benefit everyone, including businesses.
So Sarah, you've dealt with the business sector too. And how rare are the Allagashes, or what's, I love the Marge. I'm going to stick with the Marge meme.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need the Marges.
The Marges in the business.
What makes for an Allagash?
Allagash became a Marge.
Yeah.
With some heft, right? So
they really deserve some credit. So Rob Todd is the president of Allagash, and we did outreach to a lot of businesses, and it was just nice. They were the first ones that really just entertained us in a really in a real way. They're like, okay, we don't really like the idea of this, but we're going to sit down and listen to you. And they did. They had a lot of meetings. They discussed it internally. We helped them calculate what their costs might be if they were operating in Ontario or Quebec, just so they could wrap their heads around the idea. And the fact that they took the time to even try to do that, which was great. We, some of the other businesses were like, oh, this is too confusing. We don't know what's going on. So we're just going to say no. And they took the time to actually try to understand it. And they really turned into advocates, which I wasn't expecting. And I just can't say enough about how important their support was, and to almost split the business community. So it wasn't like this false choice of, oh, you're going with the environmentalists or the businesses, to kind of split these factions up so that it's so important to do.
Yeah. Is there some scale thing here? Allagash, you said is big. It's the biggest in Maine. Is that what you said? I was at a meeting in Washington years ago of like corporate responsibility and sustainability, and I raised a question. There was a panel with a guy from Nike. They're like senior vice president for all this stuff. And I said, there's this great guitar company, Taylor Guitar Company, where the leader of the company out on the West Coast, he's made it a priority to go right down the chain to where their ebony comes from, to make the fingerboards in their guitars. And they've worked with their customers to understand that for us, the most beautiful guitar doesn't have a beautifully perfect black ebony fingerboard. It has a marbled one because the trees that we get it from are from a community, and they blah blah blah. And I asked the guy from Nike, I said, why aren't the Nikes doing that? He said, well, we do we do surveys all the time of our products, and he said, if you mark a sneaker sustainable, it's like a downer. People see it as a compromise. I went, oh my God. So the scale issue or that issue seems to still be there. I'd love to think there's a way to spread the Allagash kind of gestalt.
Yeah. And, that's really related to food waste too. You know, people in the United States, they expect, you know, the shiny, perfectly, you know, proportioned fruit or vegetable, or they're not going to touch it. People are sifting through, taking out the blemished ones. I usually take those because, and you could just cut that part off. But it's that whole perception. People don't expect that in other countries necessarily, you know, and they don't need.
That's true too.
You know, so it's cultural here too. Yeah.
So talk briefly about Clink. I don't have the sound off, and anyone who's listening to this later as a podcast won't hear anyway. There's this little visual online on YouTube for Clink, but what are we looking at here?
Great. So Clink is where I work now. I've just started as their Director of Government Affairs in early February. And what Clink is really a circularity solutions provider. So we're the intermediary between, say, consumers and getting that material for recycling back to the producers, let's say. And right now, you know, bag drop recycling in beverage container deposit systems is where we're operating mostly, but we're really poised for growth, and it's really exciting to be kind of on the implementation side of a lot of these policies that I've worked to pass. So, you know, I'm a Clink customer in Maine. We where have these sustainability stations, drop-off locations at all Hannaford locations. So I buy Clink bags at Hannaford. I have my own special code. That's for my account. I fill it with my bottles and cans here at home. And then when it's convenient, I just drop it off at Hannaford and let the money accumulate into my account. And then I usually wait till, you know, 25 or 30 bucks is in there. And that's when I can apply it to my grocery bill. And that's usually the week where I buy my bullet bourbon and get my stock at home. But everybody has their own story. They might save it up for vacation, or you could easily donate to charity from the app, or a lot of charities have their own.
Oh, that's
account.
interesting.
So it's a really easy way for a lot of people to do redemption. You know, you get your money back within 2 days. Some people like to watch people count their containers and get the money right back, and that's great too. But this is how we do it, and we're operating in several other states and working to expand. And it's really fun that as their Director of Government Affairs, you know, I can work to expand beyond 10. There's only 10 states in the whole country that have this kind of system, and I can work to try to pass those policies in other states. And there's just so much potential. You know, bottles and cans are really the low-hanging fruit of all of this packaging. They're all highly recyclable. A lot of the manufacturers are demanding this material back. They want it. It's clean. It's valuable. It actually gets turned into new stuff. And we can, you know, through this system too, we could help facilitate reuse, because to get reusables back, you have a deposit on those things. Those could easily get put into the same stations and get, you know, brought to a washing station and returned back too.
That charity, the fact that you can have it go to a charity, et cetera, automatically is interesting. I was just I'm a songwriter on this side, and I was at an Irish music session just this weekend, and a woman sang a hilarious song she wrote a long time ago about redemption centers in Maine. As a newcomer, she had, you know, was trying to get used to that whole process. Would this put them out of business, or is it just like an evolution of how things would work?
Not necessarily. Like I said, I think it's different people have different preferences for how they'd like to redeem. And I think having a network of all kinds of different types to appeal to different people is great.
Yeah, I think that makes tons of sense. And right now, like at our transfer station, there's a separate place for the redeemables, and then there's the recyclables, and then there's the trash. But it would be great if there's some way to do it this way. I have to go to our Hannaford's and check it out. Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's the easiest thing for a lot of people. I know I saw the date I went into my Clink account because I can see behind the scenes now. And, you know, I saw the date that I signed up was right when my second child was born. I think I just was like, I don't have time to go to the redemption center anymore. Exactly. And then that's how that worked. And I think for a lot of the businesses, so the retailers that have to participate in these laws, they prefer this Clink system. It takes all the burden off of them, too, and, you know, drives foot traffic to the store and increases their brand and all these things. So,
yeah. Can you please come to California, because it's really hard to redeem here.
Yes, that's
People
actually
put it in the recycling bin and lose millions of depotsits. Containers go unclaimed.
California's bottle bill is a mess, and I'm not afraid to say it. Everybody knows it. But we were actually just in California a couple of weeks ago, and I really hope to bring Clink out to California. So stay tuned.
Yeah, I guess it's still kind of a morass out there in terms of different state policies and stuff. but the American way is
Yeah.
complicated. So Ed, who should be reading your book? And like, how much of you do have a section that's sort of and you have a website, or I think that's set up to try to give people some practical steps, sort of like that toolkit that Sarah mentioned for spreading EPR gospel. Who should be reading your book, and what are some of the ideas you want to?
Oh, well, everybody, of course.
Of course.
What do you ask that question? No, I think one of my motivations was to find stories about solving these problems, like what's happening in Maine and what Sarah's accomplished there. But there's different areas of our lives where waste is ever present. We talked about transportation, but it's also in our energy systems and how our buildings, our clothes, you name it, there's rampant waste, but there's things that can be done both at the top of the line, the policy decisions, but also in our own consumer choices, which collectively have power to influence those top-down decisions. So I looked for stories, and it turns out there's a lot of them where there's multiple benefits to choosing a more sustainable approach, a less wasteful approach, often economic, sometimes health, like changing, getting away from natural gas that creates emissions that are harmful inside the house, harmful to children. There's compelling reasons besides environmental ones not to use a gas stove in your house. And if you have children with any kind of respiratory issues, you really shouldn't be cooking with gas. It's a trigger for asthma and a lot of other bad things. And that's just one small example of different reasons why a less wasteful, less unsustainable approach to different things in our life would pay off. I say it's not about giving up things we love. It's about upgrading to things we're going to love better. And you talk to some of the chefs who are switching their busy restaurants away from gas and open flames to cooking with magnetic induction. It's like this magical way to cook without heating up the room, just heating up the food. It's game changing for restaurants because you also cook faster. You have healthy, happy staff, and you make more money. It's kind of wins on all fronts. And there are so many things we can do in our own lives to upgrade rather than give up stuff we love and live healthier, live more sustainably, help the planet, help ourselves. That I tried to fill the book with those kinds of stories because it's the secret sauce of feeling less hopeless and more hopeful about what the future can look like.
Yeah, and I do think this is an arena where the quote unquote average person can make a difference if they test out something like those laundry strips that my wife has.
They work great. They're awesome.
But if they do that and then say, did you hear that? Whether it's on Facebook or just to their neighbors, because otherwise, you go to the markets and I wrote about this years ago, the end caps, companies and supermarkets pay more for the end of the aisle. And I haven't seen those strips there yet. When you walk into the laundry aisle, all you see is the big jugs, and the strips are like sort of these little things. They're there now, which is kind of miraculous to me, but they still have to compete in this. The inertia factor, I guess, is big. And I do think the average person can make a difference by just sort of posting on Instagram or whatever. Hey, I tried these strips that it's kind of amazing, but they work. Lisa even uses the shampoo. It's like shampoo kind of pasty stuff instead of buying a bottle. So does that feel resonant for you guys? There is something for us to do that's not just about us.
I think it's a crossover kind of idea because you try these things. You're also supporting a business. It's creating less of a footprint in the world. It's a win-win up and around. I see Andy Keller's commenting in here. He's the founder of another solution, a reusable bag called Chico bags. And, I wrote about him in the first book. Or
interesting. Yeah. What is a Chico bag? What is a Chico bag? Oh, I see it here. A little bit better.
Yeah, it's really compact, reusable bag that you can take with you. I've got
Ah,
several of
yeah.
those that have lived in my purse for years.
I think my wife has one.
Yeah, and kind of on theme with what Edward was saying, those strips, they work great. They work better. It's like something we like better.
Right.
To me, it's not as heavy to carry. Less waste. It's just simpler. It's less messy. I don't have sticky stuff all over the top of my washing machine. I think it's an upgrade.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of tooth tablets instead of
Mhm.
paste in a plastic tube. You get a little glass jar of these little tablets, and you chew it up. It turns into
Yeah.
sort of toothpaste in your mouth.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of
That I
stuff
have
you
not
don't
seen.
want in your mouth that comes in a lot of supermarket toothpaste, and all that is stripped out of these tablets. So I think they're fantastic. Plus, they're
Yeah.
easy to travel with. And
Travel camping, they're so light. Like it's just for backpacking, you want like as light as possible.
That's amazing.
Mhm.
Here I am learning every day. Well, I hope people can share this. Not everyone can.
oh God, yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'm just trying to Google away
I don't
here.
look that good when I chew mine, but okay.
That's called Bite, I guess. BiteToothpasteBits.com. So
Right.
You
interesting.
can get fluoridated or no fluoride, whatever you want.
Depending on your misperceptions.
Yeah, and if you live in Maine, go to Go Refill. There's one on Pleasant Street in Brunswick or in
Right.
South Portland. And go see Laura Marston, who's also in Edward's book. But she sells all kinds of no waste products like these there.
Oh, we're going to have a total garbage party at Go when I'm up in Maine. So
When are you coming?
At the end of the month.
Oh, cool.
It'll be on the 28th. It's a Sunday at Go Refill in South Portland.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, let me
Yes,
know.
you definitely have to come by. I love refill stores too, and zero waste stores like Go because there's such a different experience than going to a supermarket. I had the one of the early chapters in the book is my survey of a supermarket with Jenna Jambak, the leading plastic pollution researcher and MacArthur genius, and just a really amazing person. But she warned me, a lot of people cry when they're done with this store. I didn't cry, but I felt like I don't want to go back to supermarkets and see this anymore because the packaging and the waste in every aisle, when you see it through Jenna's eyes, is why are we doing this to ourselves? Why do we have 3 different kinds of rice for sale in 18 different kinds of plastic unrecyclable packaging? And just they're selling the package, not the contents.
Yeah.
All the same.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm glad you brought that up, Edward. When I read that chapter about Jenna, I just felt seen. I was like, yes, this is the anxiety that I feel when I walk into a grocery store too. Those big grocery stores, and I've done tours around with some local reporters to try to decipher what is the best.
Where's the best?
Package. It's like you want to worry about the contents, but also the package, and sometimes they're not in the same. The healthier version isn't in the better package, and it's stressful.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be that way. I think the packaging law will help streamline types of packaging. Hopefully, eventually. Right. So that's part of the beauty of that, and just make it easier. Labeling needs to be easier. But I feel her struggle. It's awful. And when I walk into a grocery store, I look around and I just think about how soon will all of this stuff be in a landfill or an incinerator. It's like it's mind-boggling.
Well, it's so funny. The only I don't mean to pick on rice, but the only sustainably packaged rice we could find, it's just in a cardboard box, is the least healthy, most processed, most salty and chemically treated product around. I'm not going to say the brand, but it's just hilarious. And all the organic products were in unrecyclable plastic containers with composites and things that are impossible for the system to deal with. It's just so ironic and silly.
Wow.
Well, but there's solutions to that too. I think so. One of the other storylines is a nonprofit in LA called Crop Swap LA that turns people's front lawns into these incredible, beautiful, and productive micro farms, urban micro farms.
Right.
And it sort of inspired me to recall that just growing some of your own vegetables is one of the best things you can do for the environment. Because you're avoiding packaging, you're avoiding processed food, and it's actually kind of fun and tastes better. The supermarket tomato is nothing compared to the tomatoes in my backyard. So,
well, the more of that, the better. I mean, for so many reasons. Lawns are such a bizarre anachronism.
Oh, there's Crop Swap right there. Yeah,
Yeah.
Jemiah Hargens he had this vision that why are we mowing our yards when we could be eating our yards? And he's building these in food deserts in LA where access to fresh produce is really hard. And so for him, it's also an equity issue. And they can take 1,000 square foot of grass and grow enough fruit and vegetables for 25 to 40 people a week, households, I mean, a week.
Wow.
And they sell it at cost. It's a nonprofit. They have some outside funding, although it's a constant struggle, as it is with many nonprofits. But it uses 8% of the water because he recycles it and uses solar power for his pumps that a grass lawn does, which is in LA highly meaningful.
Absolutely. Well, this has been a great introduction to some really spreadable ideas, and I should try to work on that Marge concept more because, as I said, it relates so much to what Jigar Shah said about harvesting the energy resources that are available now at the federal level that local communities have to ask for. As he puts it, we can't force you to change your light bulbs in a way that's profitable, your street lights, but you can do it, and you just need a Marge. I should have Jigar, and maybe I'll get him. Maybe put me in touch with one or two of the Marges, and we'll get Jigar Shah on and do a separate session on that.
I would love that. And, Edward was kind enough to put in his book, Sarah Nichols' Top 10 Tips on How to Be a Marge. So
yes,
I should show that part.
Yeah, check it out.
Great. Well, thanks again for joining me today, especially on such a beautiful day here, day after the monumentally cool totality event. And there's so much more to do on how to waste not, want not, how to actually do it, to move to a different relationship with resources and with the things that we use, whether it's the saving bent nails or changing policies across America and corporate behavior in ways that benefit everyone. Let me just go back to the main screen. And thanks again, Sarah Nichols and Ed Humes. Good luck with the book. Good luck with Clink.
I'm going to post those 10 tips to the Marges on my website, like immediately. I didn't think of that. What a great idea.
And I'll put it on Sustain What, the blog that goes along with what I'm trying to do here. So this is Andy Revkin. Sustain What is frequent conversations about how to navigate complexity and consequential times and come out a little bit better each time. And this was a great example. Good to have you both here. This gets shared. It can be shared as soon as we're done on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, et cetera, X. And let's do more. Thanks again.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Have a great afternoon, everyone.